you drinking there, Ben?
Coffee.
I just had one of those. I don't like just one of those kind of like Black Rifle,
Hang
300
on. Oh,
milligrams of awful, and it just
Awful.
did
That's
it did
wonderful.
it did absolutely nothing.
Ooh. So you really
what's
did get
that?
up very early in the morning.
Yeah, I definitely had a long day. It's just keeping me upright, I think.
I my tolerance for long drives in the car has gone way, way down. I had a retirement luncheon on the complete opposite side of Atlanta, and it was an hour and 20 to get there, an hour and 20 to get back. And yeah, I don't like traffic anymore. I don't know that I ever did, but
Yeah,
whew,
yeah,
could have
yeah.
flown, but you know. Oh,
Well,
look who's in the chat.
there's something about an hour drive, which is fine, and then otherwise you might as well do a 3-hour drive or more. But there's something about the hour and a half, hour and 40-minute drive that is particularly painful.
Well, here's the problem with it. It's when you go an hour drive and it's 30 miles
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. That's
versus the 3-hour drive and you've gone 300
yeah,
miles.
yeah.
yeah.
There's the
Well,
difference.
Hey,
Uh,
we've got OG midlife in here,
I know.
and we've got EC there. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk about EC a little bit later in the show.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He
well,
is, we might have to mute him because he's in a bar drinking and watching this podcast. So I'm a little worried
as
how
it should be.
Yeah.
um,
Exactly. Yeah.
he'll probably be, yeah, we'll talk about it later.
And yes, AJ, I did get this joke as some other SoCal types will get. Yeah. All right. Let's do this.
Do the
That
thing.
sounds-
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 54 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, a show where we talk all things aviation for those who are starting their aviation journey in midlife. This is a podcast about sharing our experiences and the greater community's experiences as a midlifer. So, whether you're a student pilot, a seasoned veteran, or just an enthusiast who maybe wants to learn, we're glad you joined us. My name is Ben, and it feels weird to say this, but I am a commercial rated pilot in the Atlanta area, flying a Cessna 182. Tonight with us, as always, from Nashville, Tennessee, on Music Row, we have Brian. Hello, Brian.
What's going on? The Sage has now moved to a whole different level, and I can, hire you to, bring me, I don't know, breakfast or something, or I don't know. What do you do now with the commercial? But we'll
If
get to
you
that.
had,
We'll get to that.
we'll get to that later.
You
Also
can pay
tonight,
51% of the prorated share of the played. Yeah.
not if it's my play. We'll get to that later. Tonight, from the West Coast, flying his amazing flight design CTLS, our little plastic egg, our sport pilot extraordinaire. Hey, Ted, how you doing?
Hey, doing well. Yeah.
Awesome. Uh, we broadcast this podcast live on YouTube every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find it at youtube.com/ at Midlife Pilot Podcast. The live chat is open for questions and comments and making fun of us and whatever you want to do. Audio only version of this podcast is at iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Please be sure to subscribe or follow whatever your podcast player does. We love getting 5-star reviews. We'll read it on the podcast if we can get a 5-star review from you. email us at midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. Feedback, suggestions, any great stories, your life story, we'll read it. We love it. Send it to us. We also have a very active Discord community. You can send us an email requesting an invite. We'll get that sent out to you as soon as possible. And we are on the verge of having our store back up and running.
Yeah.
We just I placed an order tonight. We're going to see how that goes before we announce that it's ready to go.
Yeah.
So, Ted, what have you been up to?
Oh, so I finally got back in the plane. It's been since Thanksgiving because of terrible weather here, and
PNW,
that
baby.
that aviation therapy is great. And so I was going to go drop down to another airport, and the whole area was covered in fog. So I turned around and came back. And so I've got a question for you, which is, I was near an airport. I was, half an hour outside of the Charlie. So I go to pick up flight following as I turned around and came back. And they said, all right, hold on, come back to you. How long do you wait for them to come back to you?
Are you hearing other conversations on the frequency?
Yeah, it's about 50% busy. There's, so there's gaps and everything else.
It's a hard question, but
yeah,
it's the context. So if he's reading back a IFR clearance, then you kind of know where that's going to end, and that's when I jump in. It's when you know that he's done talking to that specific airplanes when I try to jump back in, and I'll wait 2 or 3 conversations. If he's told me to stand by, I'll let 3, maybe even 5 conversations go by with different airplanes till I jump back in saying, "Hey, you forgot about me?"
Yeah, and there was a C-130 at the coast that they were trying to get relayed traffic to. He was off the radio. So, and that wasn't super taking up all the time, but it was obviously taking up a lot of his attention and people checking in and that kind of thing. But I think that really what happened is there were 3 planes in the general area. And I think that it probably just dropped. It was like, oh, there's a guy near Salem. And then somebody else came on. And so he just assumed that was me again.
Right.
So I waited because I was waiting for that kind of big interaction to happen. And so it was 7 minutes. And so it was really interesting to go back and listen to that and think about how to do that. It's
the question. The question really is, how many CTLS flight designs will fit in a C-130?
Yes. Yeah.
And if you called in with CTLS or flight design, that's got to stick out in his memory, because there aren't a whole. It's not like it's a Skyhawk where every other going to be that way.
Yeah, I think so too. But it's fine. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't need it. If I was gonna bust some airspace, I would have been on it a little more. But it was like I was fine. I just knew I was gonna get into it. So, so I went up and there was fog, and we have some winter weather that we get right here, where there's an airport, Troutdale, that is right at the entrance or the exit to the Columbia River Gorge. So you've got 4,000-foot walls and this great funnel for the wind, and it is right there. So you know that there's not going to be any fog there. And I knew the winds were high, and so I was like, I'm going to go over and practice some landings, which I hadn't done strong windy landings in the CT yet. So here's my initial call from them.
November 4, Speed Bravo, correction, November 4, Whiskey Bravo, runway 7, wind is 07025, gust 35, clear to land, Cessna traffic, short final.
25 gust 35. So that was a lot of fun to go.
What was your ground speed over the numbers?
I saw
15 miles an hour.
I saw 27. I think I saw 23. And one time when I was climbing it, it's a 5,000-foot runway, so you get to pattern altitude at the end of the runway because of that. And so I pulled the throttle all the way back. And I hadn't asked tower, otherwise I would have put out flaps and actually watched it go backward. But I was pretty close to 0 at that point. And that's always fun. But so I did a fairly successful power off 180 when I did it, which was something that I've always wanted to try, is doing it that much wind because it's so hard to predict how
Right.
far everything is. So yeah,
I
should be
mean,
more. Yeah.
that's I would not be flying. I would not be landing at that airport in my airplane in a high
Yeah.
wing. Oh, well, unless it's pretty much right down the runway.
Well,
But
that's the thing is that's what's great about that airport is it's within 10 degrees of the
okay.
runway, and
Yeah.
there's no way otherwise. But it was like that is the perfect place to go practice strong winds because you know it's coming straight down the runway, and I can always go back home. I can always go back to my airport where it was like the windsocks were dead across town.
Right. That's really cool.
Yeah, so it was a fun little adventure.
Well, maybe if in January, I'm
Yeah.
going to be venturing up to the PNW Pacific Northwest, and Ted's offered me a ride. So
Yeah.
I need to
Yeah,
lose a little weight probably, but well, it's okay.
No, it's just that I can't go with you. So yeah.
We'll just go with quarter tanks instead of half tanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, full tanks is 8 hours, so
Yeah.
it's really easy to not, yeah.
Yeah. Brian, any fun-filled flying for you? Pardon the alliteration.
Yeah, well, I flew pretty much every day last week. The
Wow.
plane had been down for some maintenance for a minute. Nothing too terrible. It was just one of those things where you're just waiting on finding the right parts or whatever. But I flew. I actually had one momentous flight in that my sister came to visit, and down from New York, and I took her up. We went to Muscle Shoals to get barbecue, and we took a little. She has a little sort of vial of our dad's ashes that's sort of in this kind of necklace sealed thing.
Right.
And I had not been able to take her flying before until this point since I got my certificate. So she posted a great Instagram story post that said, it showed me and her, and then she's holding the vial, and it said 2.02 Siskins flew today. So that was a miraculous sort of moment for me, really, because that was the last of my siblings that I had not flown. I feel like I've sort of covered all the bases now, and
Yeah.
I felt particularly proud and like I really achieved something to be able to do that, because I just know that my dad would have gotten a real kick out of it. So that was a really great
Absolutely.
flight. I went to Knoxville. I went to other places around. I did a
That's
lot
awesome.
of flying. I did the weather was so great, and I just took advantage of it. The only thing I can say that would have been better, especially this time of year, to have such nice weather, would be if perchance, I don't know, I was doing a check ride for a new rating. But I wasn't doing that. But Ben, you sure were. Congratulations, Ben.
Thank you. Really, it takes a village, and it definitely took a village. It felt like. I do want to highlight one quick comment on your how long to wait. Josh
I saw that too.
McElhatton brings up a very good point. One thing I've noted with gratitude is how much my waiting on ATC anxiety goes down with the experience. You
Yeah.
could not say that any better, Josh. I totally agree with that. So to get into it, I chose a DPE, designated practical examiner, up in the Charlotte area. And I had met him a couple of years ago during an opposing basis meetup. And this guy, his name is Ron Horton. I'll go ahead and throw that out there. He's really a very, very neat guy. He has won the Wright Brothers Award for 50 years of safe flying. which is a really big deal. And he and I just kind of hit it off. And I reached out to him back in October, said, "Hey, this is where I'm at. I'm looking for a DPE." He said, "What, I'm really busy in December, but how does the 15th look?" And I was like, awesome. I thought I was going to be doing it a month. So he really bent over backwards to help accommodate my timing. I had, things come up between October and now, and so it was a little bit rushed at the end. So when I say it takes a village, I have our friend from our last week's podcast, Nathan Ballard, was my primary flight instructor. We had some IACRA forms we had to, dance around and get fixed. And he was, on call, waiting to help me out. We get up there. So I fly to Charlotte the day before, flew with One Dull Geek in his Cherokee 235. That was the first time I've flown with him.
That's awesome.
I aspire to have checklist discipline like he does. So we flew the route so you have to do a cross-country route that you have to discuss during the oral. And so we kind of flew that just so I can get a overview of, what am I looking at for the next day. And we had a great time. He took time out of his day. He was very gracious because he was getting ready to head down to on another trip the next day. So, and then let's see what happened after that. And then I met with a fellow who is in our chat tonight, Echo Charlie. Elliot and I met a couple years back through Opposing Bases, and I've met him in person a couple of times. Probably as nice as he is funny, and I refer to him as the Will Ferrell of aviation, because comments in the chat during OB would just have me crying with laughter. But he is a A&P with IA, and he's also a pilot. He's the youngest. At the time, he was the youngest pilot to be type rated in the Falcon 900. Youngest in number of hours. I think he had 500 hours, and he was getting a type rating in a tri-jet. He's got a very impressive resume. He's super knowledgeable in so many things. So I took my cross-country flight plan over to him, and we kind of talked through it and asked him to poke holes in it. There's always, and I guess this goes out to everybody, there's always somebody who's going to know more than you. And there's always going to be somebody who knows a lot less than you. So seek out those folks that know a lot more. Elliot was super, super helpful with me. And he gave me a tour of the Falcon, which was, pretty amazing airplane. So that was a lot of fun. Wake up next morning and we get started. It was, it's amazing to me. It's my third rating, and I probably was as nervous, if not more nervous, this one than I was the first two.
Oh,
it just never goes away.
Yeah.
And it was pointed out to me several times, if you're not nervous, then maybe something's wrong. If you don't have the jitters, then you're probably not taking it seriously enough. So I was not in fear of me not taking it seriously enough, because I was, there was one point of the oral, you both know what my go-to weather product is when I'm briefing the weather. Brian, do you want to take a guess at what that number one product is?
The Weather Channel, because you like the music?
No. Try again. The GFA tool.
Oh,
Yes, the GFA tool.
The GFA tool. And he asked me a question. He goes, well, so we're going to go to this airport and it doesn't have a weather reporting station. So what are you going to use? And I blanked on it. And it's the one thing that I would have gone to. And he knew it was nerves. Yeah. We got to where we needed to be. So, it worked out great. It was a very long oral exam, but there was a lot of stories behind the scenarios that he presented to me. So it went by very, very quickly. I had no idea how long it took until I looked at my watch when it was over. So we did that. It was great. I mean, he's such a knowledgeable guy. It's like you want to spend time with him and hear the stories. Just from osmosis, I feel like my IQ went up 20 points. Did you have a question?
Well,
Oh,
the real secret, I think, is that check rides are not supposed to teach you, and that's the thing I wanted second most was to learn, and
right.
it's such a great opportunity to be there with someone who knows more than you do, and
Yeah.
yeah,
So we did that. We got in the plane, the 182. I felt pretty confident on my maneuvers. And it was that I almost got bit. We were doing eights on pylons, and I started the maneuver wrong, and I kind of pulled out of it, and then we redid it, which I guess was legal. But and then when I did do the maneuver, it was in the you're supposed to enter on the downwind, and I didn't do that. So I got that corrected. The other one I was nervous about is the power off 180 with an accuracy landing. I was super proud of that one. I told him I want to be at the very beginning of the 1,000-foot markers, and I hit exactly the point that I was looking for. Now, it was not soft. I did go to the chiropractor yesterday. It was, but you got no engine. You're trying to get it on the ground. It doesn't really matter
Right.
how soft it is.
right.
And then he has to do a soft field landing, and he gave me a choice, which I thought was kind of interesting. He said, "You can give me a target on the runway that you're going to hit, and then you have that distance to stop before that." He goes, "Or I know that the first taxiway is a prescribed number of feet, so you put it down wherever you want as long as you get it stopped before that taxiway." And that was pretty easy. I could visualize that a lot better. So
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
You said soft field, but you meant short field.
I mean, short field. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We did this after we did the short field landing. We did a soft field takeoff. So
Do they have you do a go around on commercial?
it's
Okay.
you have the option if I'm doing a short field landing and I don't like how it's set up, I can go around. That's perfectly legal. It is
Because
not
you
a
have to
required
demonstrate.
maneuver.
Yeah, you have to demonstrate it on private, and usually that's
That's
easy
exactly right.
because you
Yeah,
usually on private you mess up at least one and need it, so it's a
exactly.
little different. Yeah.
There were some moments though where he could have asked me what my name was, and I would have to tell him to stand by. I just felt like I'm trying to process. Okay, he wants to do an emergency descent, and then I'm going through my mind, through my Rolodex. Okay, which maneuver is this? How do I need to approach it? Because the nerves were there, and we did accelerated stalls, which actually have become my favorite maneuver. 45-degree bank and just start pulling back.
Wow.
The Chandelle, it was the best Chandelle I've ever done. I hit the 180 point and the stall horn started just as I leveled out. And I mean, I've never planned it out that well. And that's a blind squirrel finding a nut.
Yeah.
Just sometimes you just get lucky, and I'll take it. I mean, that's fine. So, I mean, and then we landed, and they're required now that if they want to discontinue or fail you, they have to tell you at the point in which you failed. So, if you landed and you haven't heard you failed, then you pass. So, it was, a huge weight off my shoulders when we got on the ground and I didn't kill anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, well done. And do you now that you've been through it, do you think, considering that the commercial rating is for commercial flying, do you feel that the standards or the experience or the challenge are rightly purpose built or adequate for that function? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Here's what I think. And I was talking to AJ, who is in the chat with us tonight. You're not going to be doing a Chandelle in a Pilatus or a King Air. You don't have a need to. What it does do, though, you know your airplane inside and out and its capabilities inside and out. You know the envelope fully. And I think that translates to whatever aircraft you get into for hire to be hired in and to operate, you want to have that level of knowledge and and know it inside and out. And the spiraling descents, emergency descents, it doesn't really matter. You point that nose down and bank yourself 45 degrees at least and go. Um, so it's the express knowledge of how your airplane flies more so than the maneuver in and of itself.
Now, so do you think, because this is not real, but in my head, I'm thinking, what are the things that are not included in that training or in that scenario testing that would be perhaps happening in the real world? And I was just thinking, like, what if they had like an audio sort of plug, like an audio player that she's coming into the comms, and it's just screams of terror, from passengers in the back seat or something. Like as soon as you initiate, it starts asking. There's all these questions coming. What's going on? Or
Well, Ben said that you're not going to do a lazy 8 and a Pilatus, and Elliot said you can do a lazy 8 once. Yeah.
Let's go and ahead and disclaim that you can do any maneuver under the sun at least once. So
Yeah.
It was funny. The Denzel Washington movie where he flies the Barbie jet upside down or whatever it does, that was on TBS or one of the stations when I got home that night, thinking, "Oh, this is the next step in the process." But it's there was a lot of in the oral exam about distractions, human factors, throwing, you got a passenger who's just unleashing their stomach contents all over the back of your head. What are you going to do? And I told them, well, they weren't on the back of my head, but I did have a passenger, a month ago, just paint the front of my dash while I'm fighting a 12-knot crosswind. So yeah, it's that, you just have to focus on the task at hand.
And again, I'm
yes,
sorry about that.
Actually, the retirement party that I went to today, it was that guy. It was his retirement luncheon that I went to today. So we had a lot of fun.
He decided after that flight, he decided to retire and make sure that,
right.
He saw the end coming, and yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was, again, I knew that when I got at 24 hours after taking it, that it was going to be a great experience. But that time leading up to it, I don't care what you tell yourself. You're going to worry about this. You're going to worry about that. There's always something. There's always something.
I deliberately did not call you or bother you too much in the couple of days prior because I wanted you to feel as much as possible like no one even remembered or cared that it was going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I know that my wife and my 3 boys knew that it was going on. And of course, Elliot and a few others knew, and I know you guys knew, but yeah, the less that know about it, yeah, because people are going to ask, how did it go? And if it doesn't go well, then, but in the same regard, it's like you tell it to the world that you're going to do it, that then, you really, it makes me more motivated to do the best that I possibly could do. So I don't let myself down. So,
well, so then the question remains, what is next? Are you going to get your multi? What are you going to do?
tail wheel is going to be next.
Yeah.
I found a guy. I found a couple of different places that are doing tail wheel. It was funny, and Ted and I talked about this earlier on the flight up to Charlotte. Have you seen the AOPA sweepstakes plane, the 170?
Yeah.
I've got a major crush on that airplane, and it's at Peach State, which I'm going there tomorrow, as a matter of fact, for lunch. They were on frequency, and ATC called him out and said, "Hey, are you the AOP plane?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I chimed in. I was like, "That is an awesome looking airplane." So, but no, tail wheel is definitely next for me. I do want to do multi. I need to refresh my finances.
Oh man. Yeah.
Well, Now, about this AOPA airplane sweepstakes,
Yeah.
do you take any solace or do you believe it to be true at all that it is remotely possible for you to win that airplane by merely being a de facto member of the AOPA? Or do you feel that it is potentially only going to be won by people that pony up more? Is it
I
rigged?
believe I know it. Yeah, I believe that it's going to be people that pony up more because I'm one of those people that pony up more because I want that airplane. It's not going to happen. I am not going to lose sleep over it. But yes, I am getting my tailwheel rating in preparation of winning that airplane.
Yeah.
I love it.
So
The other one we were talking about was Stevie Triesenberg's plane, because she's flying that
140.
absolutely beautiful 140. I said it's cute, it's adorable, it's an awesome, perfectly redone plane, and so she's posting her videos about flying it from California to Oshkosh, and that's a haul in a 140, and it's really cool to watch.
Yeah. Like I said, really, ideally, I'd love a 180, just to keep the brand going like as it is. But I'm not going to complain. Whatever I get in, I will.
Yeah.
But there again, there's a lot of great takeaways, and it may be a good way to segue into the other thing we wanted to talk about. That during the leading up to the check ride, it had been told to me by several people, when you start up the plane and you're doing your briefings, make sure you do a brake check and have the DPE do it. And I'd heard stories of people discontinuing or failing their check rides because they didn't do a brake check. So I fell out of habit of doing that. And it took me 2 months of doing that to build it back in, to get away from that law of primacy. Ted, what is it that you wanted to ask about paying for things?
Yeah, so we know as private pilots, sport pilots, which is even more restricted, but we know as private pilots that you can't get payment for doing it. Your YouTube video needs to be incidental to the flight, those types of things. So what can you do now and what can't you do? Because that's what private pilots tend to think of is, I'm restricted now. I go commercial, I can do anything.
So I am not a CFI, and I am not a lawyer, but here's my understanding of the situation. I'm trying to keep this G-rated. I don't want us to be. You can provide the pilot and you can provide the plane, but you cannot provide both. So I can't come and pick you up in November 42911 and take you somewhere and charge you for it, unless it's my pro rata share. However, if I have a Part 135 certificate that I file for, now I can provide my airplane and my services. So it's still the pro rata share, and there's a lot more detail about that. It goes into that we could take up the whole podcast talking about common carriage and operational control and wet lease versus dry lease and all that. But it's basically you provide the service or the plane, but not both.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
And yes, Elliot, I am always holding out on you, my friend.
Yes. Oh yeah. So can you? Well, I guess you can't hold out because you can't supply the plane and the pilot.
That's exactly right. I can hold out. I just can't hold out using my airplane. I can say, hey, if you need somebody to fly your plane for you, I'm your guy.
Right. So that's ferrying a plane and getting paid for it, for instance.
That's right. Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
That's it. Yeah. I tried to resist doing this because I still have a little ways to go before I retire from my current job, but I did go on Indeed.com, and it was very disheartening when you first look at it. We need 250 hours of multi. We need, all these requirements. But I was with AJ and a couple of other pilots last night, and one of them is a corporate pilot. flies for a
Yeah.
Part 135 company. And a lot of these companies will pay for some of these things that you need. If you bring them with 1,000 hours of experience in a commercial rating, they will help you finish the rest of the way of where they need you to be. So it was disconcerting at first, but there's a lot more to it. And speaking of things that you can do, Todd says you could do fish spotting. I'm a huge inshore fisherman. I would love to go just take my 180 or take somebody else's 182 or whatever they want to put me in and fly around the bay all day long. I would do that. Forestry Service flies 182s. I could go to work with them tomorrow if I wanted to, I think. So
Pipeline Patrol is the other one.
Pipeline Patrol
famously
survey.
low hour. Yeah. Survey. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of survey planes, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you have to get on with the right company because a lot of them don't maintain have a reputation for not maintaining their planes.
Yeah. That does seem like some of the more dangerous stuff. So speaking of all of that, and they'll pay for type ratings. Sometimes they'll pay for some of your multi-time. Brian of Just Plain Silly was on the relaunched Fly the Transition podcast, which is basically the Ben story, right? It's people that are doing a second career into this. So, they were having that conversation specifically about don't get your own type rating. They'll get that for you, and there's some squishiness in those requirements.
I'm still waiting for Elliot. He works for a very large manufacturer, and I'm waiting for him to make me an offer to join his company and pay for my G5 Gulfstream G5 rating. I'll probably be waiting for a little while. So,
So speaking of checking the brakes, as you said, because and doing the thing that I know, maybe this is especially a thing as plane owners, or once after your first 100 hours, maybe, but it's those bad habits, right? And
Brian, you mentioned this. I don't know which conversation we were having, but the law of primacy is a real thing. And I loved my initial instructors. I thought they did a fantastic job, but I look back now at what I see watching One Dull Geek and his habits and what he does. He formed them the right way from the very beginning. I don't begrudge my instructors, but it is a conscious effort to maintain the level of discipline that I feel like I need, especially as a commercial pilot. I'll give you another example of the check ride, bad habits. I brief a departure every time. Now, depending on who my passengers are, I might not say it out loud, but I will know exactly which points and all. If it's another pilot or somebody that's even interested in aviation, I'm going to say it out loud. Well, I did that on the check ride for the first takeoff, but I didn't do it any other time after that. Yeah, because I'm not used to doing it. I'm not used to, doing a check ride. But the point is that if I was saying it out loud every single time, regardless of who's in the plane, that would not have been a problem.
Yeah. You're saying for your departure brief or just for everything?
My departure brief. No, just the departure for everything technically, but for the departure brief, absolutely. That's really what I'm referring to.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little tricky when you have say a first time small airplane passenger. You don't want to get into like when the engine fails.
Right.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
If we're below 1,000 feet, we're going to aim for that fill and pray to God.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't instill a lot of confidence. So, but you can soften it up a little bit for your non-aviation passengers, but still, that's something that I have to now work really hard at.
Well, I usually spend enough time on the passenger brief about run backward, do not go forward with the spinny thing. Those types of things that I definitely don't want to talk about. My takeoff briefing to a nervous passenger, because I've already mentioned quite a few things at that point. But I I was thinking about that because I have never been in that habit, which is you go fly, you go to another airport. Let's say you're just doing touch and goes, but it doesn't matter. You go over there. I don't brief that one. And that's not
Right.
good. But when do you do that on the flight over there? Whatever the case is, that is not a habit I've ever had, and that's not good either.
I think there's a lot of things that have helped me. For instance, when I was in training, I was never doing a lot. You know, you're not doing a lot of cross country flights. You're doing mostly procedural things, and it wasn't until I got out on my own and started going to a lot of different airports that I started using the procedure function in ForeFlight. And there's something about doing just even that for everywhere that I'm going. Ideally, I start on the ground with it and go, okay, what is the weather? If it's a long trip, you might do it on your way in, or at least you're going to obviously verify everything against what you've chosen or anticipated. But that gives me something that I'm in a tactile sense pressing or doing, that then I sort of can read from or brief back to myself, visualize, look outside, look back, compared against perhaps what, the 530s, I don't know. So there's maybe things like that, but I think what I see is I think it comes down to a lot of people in their training started vocalizing everything from the get-go versus not. I think that's a huge thing, because now, even when I'm by myself, I vocalize absolutely everything down to wild amounts of minutia, in terms of like, you would think that I'm landing a 737 half the time because I'm evaluating my approach. I'm telling, myself to, confirming that I'm aligned with the runway, or that my speed at, I'm here at 500 feet and my speed is good, and, all these things. So there's a lot of, I think, self feedback that you can kind of get yourself into that is helpful. And if you haven't built that even to start with, then you're going to be perhaps that much more behind it. I think
Well,
there's also just the primary, I think, misinterpretation of the function of checklist, at least I'm not a CFI, but I feel like early on, I started to figure out that is a means to verify what I'm doing, not a to-do list for what I'm going to do.
100%.
And
Yeah.
that really helped. But those are all interpretations that are the baseline, I think, for that primacy that you either can keep or not. But I think in general, it's totally natural, especially for us numbnuts like me that are 400 hours. Boy, is that the sweet spot to start feeling like you're kind of getting in and out of the car a little bit.
But so I do want to clarify one thing. I don't necessarily think that not saying your flow checks or your checklist items out loud is a bad habit. Uh, it depends from one person to the next, and I'll give you what I'm talking about here. A friend of mine who lives down in South Georgia, he's kind of a flying mentor to me. His name's Skip. He has a Baron. I've never heard him utter one checklist item, but you can watch his hands move in a very defined way, and he's touching things. He's just not saying anything. He has absolutely no desire to go but to fly his family around in his Baron. He doesn't have a commercial. He doesn't want to be paid for anything. So it doesn't matter to him. For me, if I'm going to be getting in the right seat of an airplane that's going to have ops manual where you've got flows and checks and reads and responses, then yeah, I need to be doing it. So I'm not saying specifically not vocalizing your checklist out loud is a bad habit in and of itself, but actually not doing it, that's the bad habit.
Yeah. Well, I think what it comes down to also is there's a creep of, like you said, in training, there's a lot of good habits that you probably have. And then slowly you start to recognize that little by little, those things are getting chipped away from. and it's not very noticeable because it's such a slow creep, and then that creates a slight void, I think, of some kind of ambiguity perhaps, and then it really sets the stage for other things to come into play that would be, it makes room for bad habits.
100% agree with that. It developed with, there's little things over time. You'll get out of a descent checklist where you're just not doing it. You're doing your flows, but about 2 months ago, I started getting back into it. I had one time where I forgot to enrich in the mixture, and I heard a little engine sputter. I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're at 9,000 feet, you idiot! When you go down to 3,000 feet, it doesn't have enough fuel." It's sometimes you get punched in the nose to remind yourself those little bitty micro things. Oh yeah, let's not forget those. That's why we have checklists. That's why we do things. There are other habits. You made a comment in your last video, which again, I say this about all of them, but I'm Brian, your video, it's maybe one of your best ones yet. You had a phrase in there. I wrote it down, and in the phrase, please, I'm sorry if I don't get it exactly right, but we're all tethered to risk. Do you remember saying that?
I said something along the lines of that in some level, maybe aspirational or otherwise, I'm just trying to always make sure that in my consciousness that I am always tethered to the realities of the risk in aviation, I suppose, was what I was getting at.
Exactly. And that to me hit the nail on the head. I felt a strong draw to that, and those are where the bad habits come in and why we need to fight them. It hit home with me very, very close. So
Yeah, I really. Brian just put out this video yesterday, and it's a good reminder of something that we've been kind of thinking, or several have been thinking about in various ways, which was how do you recognize the bad habits in yourself, and how do you call out someone else for them? And if you're only doing a BFR every 2 years, you may not be flying with someone who will point out mistakes that you're making or risk that you are taking and not thinking about, or things like that. And I think that it is a little bit easier to build those bad habits when you're flying a single plane and you're flying it generally alone, than if you're with somebody who will point that out to you.
right.
I think, by the way, I didn't really want to make, of course I wanted to make what I made, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to say it, which in a weird way became kind of a meta experience in my head, because I was thinking, no, this is, you gotta, if you've got something to say, you should say it. If it's wrong, nobody will figure it out faster than someone in the aviation community and tell you, and that's fine. If I'm right, great. Also, maybe things are not in these absolutes or these kind of binary considerations, and maybe it's just about the act or the pledge to yourself to just remain conscious and call other people out if you have to, because again, it's about being always remain tethered to the risks.
Exactly.
I think that it's easy in the same way that it is to, when you're driving a car, like for instance, when I moved to New York City and I didn't drive, for, a few years or whatever. And then you get back in a car outside of New York somewhere, you're back, wherever. It's shock. You're like, I can't believe that this is legal, that people are allowed to drive around these heavy, completely vulnerable, freewheeling. Everybody's got independent control and can do whatever they want, and they're all on their phones. And this is bonkers, man. This is absolutely insane. I think that I'm trying to just, with aviation, try to do everything I can to not. It's a battle because you want to be comfortable, because you want to not be task saturated, so that if you are in an emergency or you need that extra bandwidth, it's there. But you have to be careful about how that presents and how it molds, because it can easily become something that is problematic. And I just think that for me, I have been maybe, and maybe it's kind of a little bit of that imposter syndrome that we talk about a lot, but
Right.
it's like, who am I to say, and we are also rightfully conditioned to say, I'm not a CFI, go talk to a CFI,
Right.
Yeah.
which is all real. But at the same time, people need to be more open and available to criticism from each other, and to set aside pride and set aside your ego. My lecture every time I fly with another pilot is, I tell them, I don't have any pride. I don't have any ego. If you see something you don't like, tell me. It doesn't mean that means it could even be something that's not an issue at all, but still call it out. And then I'll say, oh, well, that's actually not a big deal, or
Right.
whatever. Put me in a position to defend, put me in a position to clarify, put me in a position to do better. And I will do the same for you. And I think that should go beyond the people that are just in the plane with you. And I think that if you see someone in YouTube videos that is doing things that are precarious, then it's better to say something than to not say something. If you see somebody at your local field, or you have one of your friends, or whatever it is, it's just always going to be better to say something than not. And we have to be above the discomfort of confrontational or seemingly confrontational conversations, so that we can keep tabs on each other, because the risks are real. And we're talking about family, we're talking about friends, we're talking
Right.
about people on the ground, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's really what I
So
was getting at.
the primacy that hit with me, and to maybe put an exclamation point on this, I have about, at this time, I had about 200 hours, and I'm flying with my brother-in-law. At the time, he was flying for the airlines, and it had probably been 2 months, and he asked me to go up with him. Now, he had 19,000 hours to my 200 hours, and we're coming in on final approach, and we're probably 250, 300 feet above the ground when he starts to flare, because his sight picture has been in a 757, and that's what the sight picture is. And I said something to him, and I'm like, to the point where, I know you got more hours than I do, but you're flaring not just a little bit early, but like days early. I mean, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I'm not in the 757." And when we landed, he said to me very pointedly and very candidly, "Don't you ever be scared to speak up. I don't care what other pilot you're flying with and how many hours. If you see something that doesn't look right to you, you speak up. The worst thing that happens is they're going to be pissed off at you, and who cares?" So, how to recognize bad habits, in yourself, how to solve.
Yeah, because we're talking about how to speak up with other people's bad habits, things like that. But we're not recording everything we do and putting it on YouTube. We're not
Right.
always having somebody in the plane with us. So how do you recognize bad habits in yourself?
That's a great question.
Be open to and encourage the observation and opinions of others, I think is one thing. Even if they're not in the plane with you, they can even check you in sort of an abstract sense of, just asking you, how do you feel about your flying right now? Do you feel like you're living up to what you challenged yourself to do in the first place? Or
Right.
do you feel like you're holding up your part of the deal? I mean, it could be even something as kind of secondary or tertiary as that. But I think it's like anything else. There's going to be signs. There's going to be small things that I think you can just pay enough attention to, Ben, when you were talking about, your mixture, being set at the
Right.
most fuel efficient setting of all time for a 182.
Yes.
You know, that
Burning 14 gallons an hour at that point, by the way.
so I think that the way to look at that, again, I'm not a CFI, but I think that at least the way I interpret things like that when they happen is it's easy to go, well, I really need to be better about checklists. And that's true. If you were following a checklist for your descent, then that wouldn't have happened. However, to me, those are little alarm bells. Those are little things kind of popping up that kind of tell me that I need to kind of be looking at the entirety of what's going on and being more aware and more thorough. It just kind of tells you you're getting a little loose.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so that's probably going to be, if you don't do anything about that, it's going to be something else the next time or whatever. So as much as it's these kind of whack-a-mole kind of, yes, I can solve this with that and I can solve this with that, I think that you can always check yourself, I think, by seeing how many of those kind of things are hanging out. I did have one take off fairly recently. I can't remember where it was or when, but it was fairly recently. But I just remember I do all my checklists and my flows to go, and I always leave my mixture super lean and the fuel pump off until I'm really actually going. And there was just one time where I forgot to do that, and I started to go with a little bit of power, and luckily I'm not jamming power and all that. So it was just a little bit of a burp, and then I was able to just slide it up and smoothly kind of carry on with it. But that just told me, you got to tighten up something. You just need to, snap into a little bit more awareness.
I think
Another
there's
example.
two different categories of or ways that I see to recognize this. The one is what we're talking about, which is when you recognize yourself making a mistake. Those are good moments to kind of look and see what other mistakes you're making. The other one that we haven't really talked about though is continue to learn. If you're reading or if you're watching CFI videos, if you're reading Killing Zone, a million other books, if you're reading AOP, whatever it is, usually those are the types where it's like people are talking about checklist discipline. You're like, oh, you know what? I'm not doing that. Or they talk about, whatever it is.
It's a great example.
How you fly the pattern. Yeah.
I was reading, I think it was an AOP article, and I had a bad habit. I was making too steep of turns in the pattern.
Yeah.
I was doing 45, and that's all in the pattern setup. I can avoid that. I don't have to make 45-degree turns. If I think I'm going to overshoot the final and I'm banking that hard, guess what? That's a terrible habit to get into. That's a great way to stall an airplane.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of that, Ted, and I'm glad you called that out.
Yeah.
Maintaining your education level and just finding different sources to find this information.
Yeah,
Josh makes another good point too. Yeah. Josh makes another good point. Invite other pilots to fly. Josh, if you need me to, I can come up there and fly with you if you need a pilot. I'm probably the only one in the group that hadn't been in your Cirrus yet, so all you have to do is ask.
It's a great plane.
So
I was happy to fly in Josh's plane when we were flying down in Florida at low altitude for long periods of time in the summer
with AC.
Yeah, that was really nice.
Not even funny.
Josh is a great pilot.
Yep. So we'll start wrapping it up here. We want you to join our Discord. Send us an email at midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. There was a couple other things. What was that? You can support us on Spotify. You can do it for as little as 25 cents an episode, 99 cents a month. Leave us feedback. There was one other thing that,
hey,
do we want to talk about the meetup?
Yeah. By the way, on the supporters, Adam R signed up. Thanks. And Peter T, our friend Peter T, upped his level, which is not actually easy to do in Spotify. So thanks, Peter.
Thanks for making that effort, Peter. We appreciate you.
Yeah. So speaking of Josh is Cirrus. I've sat in it. I haven't flown in it. I'm hoping that he's coming to the meetup in April because I'd love to go flying in it. So when is this? April 26th?
April 28th
28th? Yeah.
through the 30th is when we're all getting together in bachelorette party capital of the U.S., also known as Nashville. White Claw
Yes.
Clapper.
Yeah.
So let's smoothly say this again, guys, because we just said a lot of days and things, but I just want people to be clear. It is April 26th through the 28th. The main
good.
day is the 27th. That is the Saturday. Get here early in the week, leave later the next week, do whatever you want. We'll be getting together the Friday night, and then we'll be doing a lot of different flying adventures on Saturday. And there'll even be a little bit more flying early on Sunday. We have a website that will be in the show notes that will explain all of the stops. You can even see video of each of these locations. There's a lot of information there, but most importantly, we have on this website that is too complicated to say in the audio podcast, but is in the show notes, that there is a button that is really easy to find on that website where you just click it and answer a few non-intrusive questions that state your intention to come so that we can gauge the interest and likelihood of who is coming and whether you're bringing a plane or not. It helps us do some of this planning. I will say right away that we possibly have gotten in over our heads and there's been way more interest than we ever anticipated, but we will make it all happen one way or the other. And I don't know what the weight limit is in Josh's plane, but we can probably put 6 or 7 people in there. I don't know. So no, but it's been incredible to see the amount of interest that we've had, and we will make it all happen. And ultimately, while the flying stuff is great, I always just want to reiterate that we've done this before. The hanging out is always the best part. So you'll get some cool flying in and see some new places, but you'll also get to mix it up in some other different airplanes and meet new people and see the familiar faces of Discord and what do you call it? IRL. And
Yeah.
it's really a very exciting thing. And if Chris, OG Midlife Pilot, makes it, then it'll just be the icing on the cake. But anyway, that's the gist of it. The show notes are the doobly-doo is where you go to get all the information about that. And we are super excited. I'm glad we actually thought of it ahead of time so we can plan.
And Ben's been doing a lot of work. We're gonna on some Airbnb accommodations, and probably gonna send out a message in the next, I don't know, week or so to start seeing who's interested in that. I literally booked my tickets today, so I'm coming out. I'll be there Thursday evening and be leaving Sunday evening. So if anybody's coming early, be around beginning Thursday evening. Officially, it starts late Friday.
So
Well-
I'm going to go on record. Juliet Echo Foxtrot in the chat said, "Bring your own White Claws." I am working on a sponsorship from White Claws. I'm hoping to have that you don't have to bring your own, because nobody, especially any midlifers, really should be bringing caught with White Claw in your airplane. So, anything else to cover on that, gentlemen?
Non-alcoholic options are available as well, and
Absolutely.
we're serious about not drinking too heavily, and because the flying is drinking, flying, hang out with people is kind of the priority order here. So
Totally agree. So we'll wrap this up, but for next week, we've got some stuff in the works. It's going to be a Christmas holiday year-end special review. We've got
Is that what we're calling it?
I don't know what we're calling it. I'm just throwing out a bag of words episode here. So year in review.
But it's gonna be big. It's gonna be big. There's gonna be tons of. There's countdowns. There are lists.
Yes.
There's just all kinds of pre-production that is going into this, and you guys have gone completely ham on this whole thing.
Yeah, we'll see. I hope it goes as well as I think it will.
Is it going to be 3 hours long or
No,
2 hours?
I don't know.
It's going to be long.
Depends on how much I drink. I don't think it'll be that long.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. I'm excited.
Yeah.
No promises here on how long it's going to be or how chaotic it is. We're just going to have fun.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap it up with that. Gentlemen, thanks for potting with us tonight. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Been reading your comments, trying to get to a few of them. Shout out to Elliot and Nathan Ballard. You guys really helped me out this past week. I'm very grateful for you all and grateful for all the support of everybody that's reached out. I say it too much, but this community is pretty amazing. So thank you all. Wrapping up episode 54 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Good night, everybody.
All right. Good night.